Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this leadership episode of 30 Minutes to President's Club. My name is Armand Farouk, and I'm here with my co-host, Mark Cosgrove. And today we have the one and only, for round two, Sonny Round. He is the Director of Global Sales Development over at Panopto. He has exceeded pipeline generation quota targets for the past 16 quarters in a row, 4 years in a row, and he's led pipeline generation efforts to unicorn valuations 2 times at past companies. Mark, why should people listen?
You just said why somebody, the proof is in the pudding, y'all. We get a really interesting dynamic between what is the relationship between sales and marketing. And Sonny drops a couple metrics that I've never heard of anybody measuring that immediately I was like adding it to my bag.
Boom. And a 3, 2, 1, let's roll. Alrighty, Sonny, welcome back to the show. We start every show with your top 3 actionable leadership takeaways. Let's get your 3.
Hey, it's great to be back. First takeaway, monthly build the pipe meeting, right? So the monthly build the pipe meeting is a great way to effectively tie your funnel together for demand gen. And what I mean by that is connecting the marketing team with the sales team and making sure that we're optimizing the process of bringing new leads into the pipeline, and also making sure that we're qualifying and handing them off to AEs in a really effective way. And sometimes I think that there's a healthy amount of headbutting between sales and marketing. But sometimes what I've seen is that headbutting doesn't always resolve in working together to optimize and fix both sides of the funnel, because no funnel is perfect on both sides or anywhere in general. And the more you work together with your sales and marketing team, the better your funnel is going to become. So what we do in that build the pipe meeting is we standardize the data. What are the things that you're going to look at consistently? Right? How are you going to collect your data at the MQL level? And that could be what are your lead sources? What are the things you care about? Do you care about speed to lead, other metrics in your Salesforce that you're optimizing for? And the next thing is review that data with a very fine comb and make sure that you're consistent in reviewing the same data. So the 4 slides for that meeting could be, here are the leads by each key source this month, right? Here are the conversions by each key source this month. How many of those leads did we end up getting to turn into a qualified meeting? The third slide could be, how many of those qualified meetings turned into actual qualified opportunities by lead source again? And then that fourth slide could be the total pipeline amount that was built for the month and by lead source. And the key there is benchmarking that data before you start that meeting, so that you can say, here's what we're doing today, and here's what we want to do tomorrow, and here are the levers that we want to pull to improve each one of those conversions, right?
I love those same 4 slides every time. What's number 2?
Number 2 is to build pipeline with the 80-20 rule, right? Honestly, the best ideas, they come from trying out new ideas that haven't been done before. The thing about trying new ideas is that sometimes they fall flat. What I always tell our team and our reps is follow the 80-20 rule. 80% of what we do is going to be things that we know and are proven to work, right? The high priority inbound lead sources, outbounding into recycled leads or into closed loss deals. Those are tried and true methodologies, the standard ICPs that we reach out to, all that good stuff. The 20% is trying new channels and testing new creative messaging ideas that maybe we haven't done so much in the past. So that 20% could be, hey, looks like LinkedIn has this new ability to record videos if you're sending messages on your phone. I'm going to try to send 5 messages a day for a week. And at the end of that week, I'm going to go back and look and see, hey, did these have a higher chance of replying than when I just sent a message that was strictly text-based, right? Let your reps be their own creators. I think sometimes managers can understandably want to standardize every single process, but the truth is some things are better left to be uncaged, if you will. And so let people be creative. People want to try new things. People want to be creative, but at the same time, do it within a framework that works and can remain productive by following that 80-20 rule.
All righty, bring us home. What's number 3?
So number 3 is turn your whole company into salespeople with creative campaigns. I'm sure everybody has heard the saying that referrals grow on trees. They're called referral trees, something or other like that. But one of the things that we did at Panopto is we actually recently launched an alma mater outreach program. And Panopto is actually a video content management tool used by most universities and colleges worldwide. And one of the things that we realized is, hey, a lot of people that work at Panopto went to college. A lot of folks went on to get master's degrees and post-grad degrees. And Not all of those schools are Panopto customers today. So what we did is we took a database of our employees working with our HR team, and we went and enriched it to see where everybody went to school, whether it be undergrad or postgrad. And then we compared it against our database to see which one of these are customers and which ones are not. From there, we took the ones that weren't customers and we said, here's a templated approach if you want to reach out to your alma mater and help evangelize Panopto and turn them into a customer. We also created a pretty fun spiff gamification program around that. It wasn't like we were asking people to do this for free. Salespeople are coin operated, and we would expect no different if we were asking folks from other teams to sell. And the results were really positive. It helped connect the organization to the sales org and understand a day in the life of what it's like to sell. We were able to build over $500,000 in pipeline, and we had a dedicated Slack for folks that got responses but weren't quite sure how to reply to work with the sales team to build an objection handling response. So at the end of the day, it's been a really successful campaign. It's actually going to be something that we evergreen and put into our onboarding process just to help people understand the motions and who the key personas are and really what the value of the tool is. And luckily enough, I was able to reach out to my own alma mater, shout out Lafayette College, who were unfortunately using a competitor and have switched since over to Panopto. So we've got them now. They're in good hands, and go Leopards.
Listen, that last one is pretty interesting, but I do want to dig into the one that I think is probably most applicable to everybody, and one that I found at Outreach and at Catalyst to be a huge driver of revenue and alignment, which is this sales and marketing alignment meeting. Now, Sonny, you said you get everybody in a room, you look at the same things, and people don't point fingers, but we all know what happens when stuff gets tough and when a number or two is bad. Most people point fingers. Go through, explain to me, how do you keep people from pointing fingers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it is a fine line between pointing fingers and holding each other accountable. And I think sometimes you almost have to toe the line in order to have a really meaningful conversation. But in my opinion, the most important thing is to standardize and agree on the data and how you're collecting the data, formatting the data, and reviewing that data, so that there's no funny business around, well, that one didn't really count because it wasn't actually qualified. So, no, we agree what a marketing qualified lead is. This meets those terms, and that number was met. From there, you could say, our SDRs, what happened this month? Why did we convert 3% lower than we're used to converting on this lead source? And that's where I think it's most helpful to actually talk to the reps, talk to the team, say, a lot of these leads that joined this webinar were lower level leads than usually we get at a webinar. Right? Maybe there was a lot of analysts in that particular webinar. And so it's not that we're not having meaningful conversations. They're just not converting to meetings and qualified opportunities just yet. But hey, we're learning a lot about these accounts. We're doing a lot of really impactful discovery. We're finding our way up the food chain to get to the meaningful buyers and decision makers in the org. It's just not as instant a conversion as maybe some of the past months' webinars were. So we can dig a layer deeper into that data.
I think so we had something similar at Outreach and at Catalyst. It was a weekly meeting. And it's funny, in the beginning, the executives wanted to come into this meeting. And then when we realized that's letting them watch us make the sausage, right? We want to deliver a sausage, not let them watch us make it. They don't want to see what all goes into this. They don't understand half of it anyway. We moved them out. It was me, my VP of sales dev, and my senior director of demand gen, who owned all the demand gen stuff. And it's funny, I'd see if you'd agree with this. We had two kind of rules. Rule one was your first point. Same data, always delivered by a third party, no interpretation, just the raw data, and you need to react to it, right? And the second was, any problem in this meeting is all of our problem. And so if demand gen is hurting, that's my problem and that's SDR's problem. Just like if AE prospecting was hurting, it was demand gen problem and AE and SDR problem. And what that did is it created this awesome collaborative, okay, I know it's demand gen, but it's my problem too. What is my part of that fix? And when you start to get that, like it really creates this camaraderie. Steve and Harmony, those are my two partners in crime. Like, we were tight as thieves all the time, just like fixing stuff. And we never showed up to a board meeting or an executive meeting and were split or divided. It was one front all the freaking time. It made a huge difference. I'm wondering if you had something similar like that. where you're at.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's definitely super important to be aligned. And one of the things we say is if you're going to highlight a problem in this data, well, first of all, the data should be sent out the day before, right? So that people, the stakeholders can review that and really go into that meeting without feeling blindsided. Definitely fully agree. Third party provided data. That's the importance and the criticality of the revenue operations team. And then one of the things we always say is if you're going to point out a problem, try to be part of the solution, right? So if there's an issue at a certain point in the conversion of the funnel, hey, maybe if we tried doing this to increase those conversions, maybe we could send a $5 coffee so that more people are compelled to take that next meeting and convert into a really qualified opportunity. That might help. And the other thing that I would say to 100% agree with your point on alignment is the comp plans for our leaders of sales and marketing and operations are a portion of all of those comp plans and bonus plans are tied to the company revenue metrics. So it's not like marketing only cares about getting theirs with MQLs or SDRs teams only care about getting a number of meetings or asking AEs to flip a bunch of stuff that maybe wasn't qualified. Every single person, including our SCRs, are tied to revenue. And that's a really powerful way to create alignment that matters, works, and ultimately creates the goal that everyone should be aligned to, which is generating revenue and generating new business for that go-to-market org.
How does that work? Could you break it down for marketing and SDR, how they're incentivized on revenue?
Yeah. So for marketing, it's like an ELT comp plan, right? So like an executive comp plan where marketing bonuses, from my understanding, they're typically not as volume driven, where it's like, hey, if you get 1,000 MQLs, you're going to make X amount of money. It's usually somewhere in the range of a 15 to 20% bonus if they hit certain goals and objectives. And for the sales and sales development side, which I can definitely speak to a little bit more intricately, is that we have 80% of our bonus tied to sales qualified opportunities. And then we have 20% tied to the regional new business revenue goal of that region. So on one hand, it can be frustrating because as an SDR, you might say, I'm not closing the deals. It's totally out of my hands. But on the other hand, it's like, you're a huge part of closing those deals. The qualification that you're doing and all the work you're doing to get this opportunity up and running matters a lot. And the more you take a vested interest in really driving this forward the best way possible to align to it closing as revenue, the better off we're going to be as an org.
I'd say right now, Sonny, that most companies are really struggling at the very top of the funnel, like trying to get pipeline coverage. So why don't we go through some of the specific metrics pre-AE that you guys track all the way through? Then I'll share what we tracked at Outreach and Catalyst.
As far as like how we look at the inbound metrics for an SDR specifically, we're looking at a couple of key things, right? So we're looking at MQL to reply. How many of the MQLs that you got did you end up generating a reply from? Just reply rate, right?
One.
And reply rate's awesome. We love replies. We love to have a standardized benchmark of reply rate because we can look at that and say, hey, do our sequences need some work? Are we not hitting home with the way that we're templating and creating the customization? Is a rep maybe not making their calls, or are we looking into that? Are they dialing at strange times that maybe might not be aligned to the prospects? There's a few levers in there that are definitely important. But after reply rate, I think what we go to next is what I think is the most important metric, which is reply to meeting conversion. So it's like you got 100 MQLs, you had a reply rate of 20%, you got 20 replies. A really good rep might get 10 meetings from those 20 replies. So that's a reply to meeting rate of 50%. A rep who's maybe struggling and has some things that we can work on would maybe get 2 or 3 meetings from those 20 replies. So they've got closer to 10 or 15% meeting to reply to meeting rate. And when you see a low reply to meeting rate, like there's a couple things that jump out. And one of those things is, are we putting the right leads in the top of the funnel? That's definitely more relevant to outbound because hopefully your inbound leads are coming in a way where you're working with marketing to give them feedback and say, hey, here are the key titles. Here's the account minimums that we want to score leads by. And here's the engagement that we feel like is ready to come over the fence as an MQL. But the bigger and more important lever there is objection handling, right? All these replies you're getting, I doubt 18 of those 20 replies were no's. And it goes back to the book that Armand recently came out with, Cold Calling Sucks, where it's the Mr. Miyagi effect, right? When you get an objection, are you taking it in stride? Are you acknowledging it and saying, hey, I actually expected you to say that, right? Or I figured you had something in place right now. And then shifting it into a next step that's a little bit more palatable, a little bit more digestible. How about we just have an educational conversation around some of the trends that we're seeing in the space, in the ed tech space, and also to show you some of our newly released products, just so that in the future, when you're ready to make a decision, what's out there? How does that sound? Take something like that, for example, and say, okay, maybe we can take the 2 meetings that rep's getting and turn those into closer to 7 to 10 meetings. And that's a world of difference right there.
Those are some super interesting metrics that I don't think many orgs are tracking. I'm going to share mine. I don't know if there's as interesting as yours, but I always start with outbound with active opportunities, like our active outbound accounts, AOAs. How many accounts are we actively outbounding to? And that means that they have a manual step done within the last 10 days, right? I want to know, do we have a good volume at the top? Then what we do is we say, all right, what's the conversion rate then to a booked meeting, then a held meeting, and then a held meeting to qualified pipeline? Those were the things that I went through every single week. And you got to remember, there's 2 metrics. There's volume and conversion. Volume is the stopping point. How many active outbound accounts? How many meetings booked? How many meetings held? How many qualified opportunities? And you need to look at that on number and on dollars. If you just look at number, what happens is you can have really good conversion rates, but you're not converting the highest value opportunities and you're losing dollars. If you just look at dollars, you could be losing a lot of the long tail, smaller SMB accounts, but your conversion rates look really good. You got to be really careful. And so I divide the funnel. Half is the number, half is the dollars. And then I look at each station along the way, which that implies though that you then need to have a size of prize. Like, how big is this account that I'm going after? What is the total amount of revenue that I think could be there, which is something your RevOps team can help you with. But looking at those 2 conversions through immediately, usually, and I'm Sonny, I'd be interested if you see this too, but even the most junior manager, when you put that number in front of them week after week, month after month, and they see it the same format, and it's not like rehearsed or messed with, it's raw. These are the numbers. They can see the problem. That's what you want, is you want to see the problem, right? And then you have to decide, is when I'm looking at a blip, for example, if my book meetings are down this week, guess what? Salesforce or Dreamforce was last week, so nobody was around to book a meeting with. That makes sense. It's a blip. We don't do anything with a blip. We just see it through. Or is it a problem? And if it's a problem, it needs a program. And a program is something we put in place to affect a single metric that we're measuring the impact of. And that's what I found. If you do that top of funnel, you can catch stuff and get it fixed, unless it's like some kind of market-wide collapse or something that everybody's struggling with.
So I have questions for both of you guys on running this meeting, and then I want to talk about some of the actual top of funnel plays you could run if you're an SDR leader, manager, whatever it is. I've seen these meetings go really well where they're collaborative. I've seen them go really poorly where person sees SDR meetings are down. They look at it, they're like, oh, that's not good. But they don't actually know why. Because if SDR meetings are down, for example, or even if volume is down or if conversion is down, you might not have the second or third level data in your back pocket to be able to give the room an accurate reason why it's happening. And so you might not be able to actually recommend a suggested program. And for these meetings, are you guys sending out like a pre-read, and is each department responsible for coming with their point of view on why numbers are down? Or is this just meant to be, look, you show up and we sort of work through the problem live together?
I think it's important to send out the deck a day before the meeting so that people can read it and review it before going into the meeting. I don't necessarily think that there needs to be an additional meeting before the meeting to align on where people are at, because I think that's what the meeting's for. And a key to having an effective conversation there is trying to avoid going into defense mode, which is really hard as a leader to do when one of the metrics that you own is down. Trying to not immediately defend and say the leads were bad that week or this, that, or the other. And it's be vulnerable, look at what your team is doing and what you can control, and say, hey, I went through some of this after I got the deck, and what I realized is 2 of our reps had taken PTO on a Friday last week, and a lot of these leads didn't quite make it to that third, fourth step where we usually see a little bit more conversion off of those calls, right? That's on me. That's something that we're gonna own, and this week we're gonna make up for it because we're gonna do double the calls, or we expect that to still convert down the line. But that's something that we can do better. And by the way, I did have a conversation with my rep, and they did say that something they noticed is that a number of leads have been coming through the past couple weeks that don't quite meet the minimum account criteria. Is there any way we could look into building into our lead scoring, filtering, some kind of stop guards against things like that, just so that we're all spending our time with the most effective conversations? So I'm admitting something that we can improve, which is 100% true and on me, but I'm also making an ask where it's like, hey, based on this feedback, are you willing to change something and help us as well?
Yeah. I love that. We had the concept of level 1, level 2 metrics. Some people call them leading and lagging metrics. Like level 1 metrics are those volume metrics, like number of meetings booked. That's a lagging metric. And then what we'd have is we'd have 5 to 9 different leading metrics that would point to why that lagging metric was bad. And that's where you could easily find the answer. You usually see something in those leading metrics. And what we decided was if you couldn't find something in the leading metrics, then that meant that it was something so weird, something so one-off, something so minor that it would probably just end up fixing itself, which I know is a weird kind of thing to say and a weird approach. But if you're going like 3 or 4 levels deep in leading metrics and you're not seeing it, then there's something that is either so fundamentally broken, you're just missing it, or it's so nuanced that you're probably never going to find it and fix it in time anyway. And so I think you do need to have your lagging level 1 metrics that you're on the dashboard. If you're using like Tableau or something like that, we'd have a double click in and then it would show the 9 leading metrics that would feed that lagging metric. And usually in that second curse, we'd find it. Now, we're doing our meeting every week, so we didn't really need to have a pre-read. The pre-read was the week before in a way, you know what I mean? Once you get in that kind of a rhythm, we really knew what was going on. We didn't need to do it, but I would definitely never recommend having a meeting about a meeting. Having a meeting about a meeting means you have too many meetings.
So I want to bring this all the way down to tactical SDR manager level. And Mark, I'm just going to piggyback off of what you said. A lot of times I'll start by just looking at 2 things. How many meetings did they generate? And where was their activity volume? And if something seems off, then I'll look at a few of the leading metrics on the meeting. So if activity is constant and meetings are down, that means it's a conversion issue. And for example, for emails, you can learn a lot just by looking at the open rates and the reply rates from last week. And those are 2 example places where it's like, oh, we're open rates way down. We might have a deliverability problem. Were open rates consistent and reply rates were down? Did we change our messaging? And so usually you don't have to go that deep to find the answer. My question for you guys is this. I've been coaching one SDR who has really healthy activity volumes, pretty standard in line with SDR. And every week we're hitting the numbers. And it seems every week we're trying a new campaign and continuing the old campaigns. And I swear I cannot get this number to go above 3 meetings per week. It's driving me crazy. It's like clockwork. It's not 2, it's not 4, it's not 5, it's 3 meetings every single week. And I think doing more activity, at least as of right now, is not the best idea due to TAM constraints and other things. And they're doing a lot of activity. But I'm curious, if you see someone flatlining on activity, how do you tend to approach it? Or if you see someone flatlining on meetings booked, how do you tend to lift that number?
I think that's where the 20% rule can come into effect, where it's like, hey, if you're getting those 3 meetings on the 80% of workflow that we feel should be there all the time and we should be able to recreate all the time, that's really solid. And hopefully those 3 meetings a week are getting that rep pretty close to their quota or their number. But I think that's where the 20% rule comes in, where it's, hey, let's try something new. And maybe I think a lot of SDRs, if you say, let's try something new, a lot of them have an idea ready that they've been waiting to run with and are excited to launch. And sometimes it's just about working through with them. What do you want to do? What do you want to launch right now? I want to launch a campaign to go after energy companies in the Southeast United States. Great. Let's go do some research. Let's see what those energy companies care about right now. Let's see what laws and regulations might be going into effect and how their employees might need to be trained with a video learning system that Panopto can help be for them. I think that's where the 20% creativity might help them to unlock that 4th or maybe that 5th meeting that they weren't getting within that standard workflow, which is a lot of onboarding programs are optimized to meet that standard workflow and do that 80. And it's a next step up as an SDR, as a rep to go own the autonomy around the 20.
Yeah. There always is a danger with people that manage specifically to activity. If I see activity flatlining and results flatlining, and the results aren't what I want, but I feel like the activity levels, then the things I dig in are, one, are they targeting the right people? Because you can hit your activity goal, but be off target. The second is, do you have the right surface area? 100 people in one account is very different than 5 people at 20 accounts, right? It's the right surface area there on accounts and people. The third is right messaging. Have they lost their way on the phone or in their emails? There's something that they're saying to people that's off. Maybe they're objection handling or something like that. And then the last one is, are they following the right process? You can get in your stuff, but you're not following the SLAs. You're like 2 or 3 days late on inbound leads or something like that. And so those are like my big things: target, surface area, message, process. And there's probably 4 or 5 more if I sat around and thought about it. But I think what's most important for a leader, though, is like in these scenarios, when you do it, you need to sit down and pause for 10 minutes and just write down, these are the 7 things I'm going to check. Then what you need to do is not just throw them at a rep. You need to make that into something that's a training and a program for your reps and be like, listen, let me show you how to self-coach. Let me show you the 7 things that I look for that you could look for on your own, so I don't have to look for them because you're crushing it, right? And that final step is, don't always do it off the cuff in your head. Write it down. There's a book called The Checklist Manifesto. The most important jobs in the world all have checklists. Surgeon, airline pilot. Where there's lives on the line, they have to checklist things, like manually check it. It's funny. I noticed this the other day. For the first time ever, I saw a pilot do a walk around of the plane before I got on the plane. That made me feel a lot safer as somebody about to get on that plane, right? Because I know that dude's going to die with me if he finds he's not going to get on the plane he doesn't feel safe with, right? Make sure you sit down, think about it. Then how do I get my reps to do this on their own? Because now that I have it written down, it's something that I can teach.
My checklist is something similar to yours, Mark. And then I try to apply the 80-20 rule from you, Sonny, every single week. For example, first thing that happens is they pick up accounts. So you can look at the accounts that they're looking at. From there, you need to make sure that they're reaching out to the right people on those accounts. You'd be surprised. If they're having a reply rate issue, oftentimes it has nothing to do with the messaging. It's just the wrong person got the message in the first place. After accounts, people, you have the trigger. So you might be reaching out to the right accounts with the right people at the wrong time. Or you're reaching out to the coldest accounts instead of close loss opportunities or people who are raising their hand. And then the last one is the messaging. And the most common mistake that I see SDRs, SDR managers, leaders make is they see reply rates go down and they say, let's rewrite all of our sequences. But oftentimes, if your emails are half decent and they're being sent to the wrong people, like that's the problem. If you send a half decent email to the right person, it's going to convert way better than a phenomenal email to the wrong person. And so when you're doing this, have your checklist, but then don't stack on new, on new, on new. So don't try new accounts with new people, with new messaging, with new triggers. Pick one of them and experiment with that in the 20% for that week alone.
Love that.
Cool. Alrighty, Sonny, this was an awesome interview. Unfortunately, we have to move to the final question, and it is this. We talked about a lot of good habits that sales leaders can exhibit, but it's time to talk about a bad one. So what is one bad habit that every sales leader should break so that all teams can get a little bit better?
One bad habit that sales leaders should break so that everyone else can get a little bit better is knowing everything. I think a lot of sales leaders and leaders in general tend to default to, I know the answer to this immediately. And I think the best leaders that I've ever worked with have been able to say, I don't know the answer to that, but here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go find the data we need to make that evaluation to better understand it and make a decision moving forward. That's my commitment to you.
Boom. Sonny, amazing show. Everyone, hang on for a 60-second recap coming up soon. Alrighty, Mark, it's time for a 2x2 recap from this episode with Sonny Round. What do you have for your 2?
2x2. Number 1, managing experimentation is really important so that it doesn't become random or rampant. And his idea of like 80% of what my team does is process driven and 20% is newfangled cool stuff that we're trying out. I love that as like a rule of thumb. And then the other thing is the metric of MQL to reply Never thought of that, but what a great way to measure interest and engagement and putting them together. I think that was a really cool metric to keep track of.
Number 3, I loved the same 4 slides every single time you jump into a weekly or monthly build the pipe meeting. The 4 slides that he had were leads by each source, conversion by lead source, conversion from meeting to op by lead source, and then total pipeline amount. And then the last one is one that came from you, Sonny, and a little bit of me, which is have your solving top of funnel problem punch list. So if you see that reply rates are down or meetings are down, you start with the accounts, then you go to the people on the accounts, then you go to the trigger, then you go to the messaging. Don't just jump and start figure out where the problem is first and then do one thing to fix that problem. Alrighty, folks, if you like this one, Mark and I actually recorded an episode together a while back called How to Fix Your Outbound Problem. And we went through Mark's whole lead funnel, all the metrics he tracks, and then different ways you can fix your funnel. That is 100% a skill set and a language that you will need to learn how to speak if you even want to be a director of sales, let alone a VP of sales or CRO. So, folks, I know this metric stuff can sometimes sound a little bit more scientific. Get to learn it if you want to do more than just doing call coaching every single day. Alrighty, go check that show out. It's down in the show notes. Catch you on the next one.